below $2 a gallon. Crude oil remains under some selling pressure. Prices are down better than 50% from where they were just a year ago. Joining us right now is Special Envoy and Coordinator for the International Energy Affairs at the U.S. Department of State, Amos Hochstein. Good to see you, Amos.
It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. What has been the impact of falling oil prices?
Well, I think you have different impacts in different parts of the world. You know, in the United States, we've seen that supporting our economic growth. But at the same time, in other countries that rely on oil as their number one generator of revenues, they're coming under a lot of pressure with losing about 60 or over % of their revenues, and they were not prepared for that.
What about oil on the market in terms of supply? We just spoke with potentially the incoming Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. He wants this ban lifted on oil exports. What do you think happens in that regard?
Well, I think we've made it clear that that's not the discussion that I think we should have at the moment of whether to lift the ban or not.
Why?
Because I think we have to, where we are today on oil prices reflects a position that we have to look at what does it affect the markets and how do we look at the international effect on it, not just whether or not we lift the ban or not, but what's the more comprehensive issues that the market is facing with oil prices. And I think that if you look around the world and look at where the supply and demand curves are and what the conditions of those who are producing states, where they are, I think we all need some time to understand where the market is and then look as we make the decisions as what is good for the United States, what's good for the market, and how this is a global commodity. It's not just an American commodity competing with a international one.
Just give us an example, though, of a more comprehensive issue other than talking about oil exports. I mean, what are you watching? OPEC says that, they're going to produce more. We're producing more. They're calling for $80 oil prices. Goldman Sachs, a big voice in the energy markets, calling for $20. What is the biggest story in oil right now?
Well, I think you just said something incredible, right? Some are calling for $80 oil while others are calling for $20 oil.
Right in the middle.
I think that as we were seeing the oil price decline about a year and a quarter ago, I was asked what's the break-even point for the United States, and it seemed that the same experts that you're referring to now always talked about $10 below whatever was the price at that given moment. So when it was $90, everybody was predicting 80 and 70. So I think I'm going to stay away from the predicting of what oil price is going to be. I think where we are, we've seen a number of things happen at the same time. We've seen a remarkable growth in supply side in the United States as well as elsewhere. We've seen a contraction economically in certain parts of the world. We're doing more with less. So we have to understand how these all play together. The shale revolution in the United States has changed entirely the dynamics of oil, where it's not only about what OPEC does, but rather we've introduced a certain democratization in the oil process, where you have not one person in the United States, the President of the United States, or one CEO who's going to make a decision how much is produced. But it's actually, for the first time, going to be a significant amount of oil that's going to be really targeted at what prices. So if we grow to a certain point, and there's a certain growth in price at a certain point, the U.S. is going to increase. We have over 4,000.
What's interesting about this is that, and I deal with this every day because I deal with the highest level institutional investors, that everyone has an energy team. Everyone's got a supply and demand guy. But a lot of people miss the money printing piece, which is, again, you cut interest rates to zero, you create $150 oil, then you stuck it between 100 and 150. That created oversupply. So I rarely hear the U.S. dollar side, the link to monetary policy. Is there part of the dialogue strategically to say to yourselves that it's not just supply and demand? There's a mountain of supply that was born out of 0% interest rate policy.
Well, for sure. And if you look at the shale revolution in the United States, it was fueled by a lot of very cheap cash and easy money, and that was there. But I think we have not just the supply and demand, and I think the money side, as you state, but also the geopolitics have changed over the last several years. We hit that spike oil in June of 2014 when ISIL took over Mosul. And in the days following that, we saw that spike. But once the realization in the markets was that ISIL was not likely to go to the south, and south of Iraq, where the bulk of the actual production is 3 million barrels or so, that's when we started seeing that slide in oil price, and it never stopped.
But talk about that. You said that there's some of these oil-producing countries are losing more than 60% of their revenue. How much are you talking about the potential political instability in these nations, the financial instability, and the dangerous actions that leaders might take to prop up that oil price?
Well, we're definitely looking at across the world. And while people tend to focus on the largest producers, some of the relatively small producers, but still significant, are the ones that I think we should be most concerned about. I'm not going to name names of countries, but you have a lot of producers out there who are producing only, let's say, at the several 100,000 barrels a day, but still that is 90 to 95% of their revenues. And taking that away, these are not countries that are sitting with reserves or with sovereign wealth funds.
Amos,
name a name.
Jeb Bush, we talk about Saudi, Brazil, what are you talking about? I mean, the energy producers are obvious, right?
Well,
what names are you afraid to name? I mean, it's pretty obvious. Who the energy producers?
Nigeria, smaller producers.
Well, I think that what we've seen over the last few years with the $100 oil plus is that we've seen growth in the producing club. And some of the smaller producers in East and West Africa, and Central America, and South America, Southeast Asia, you're seeing that are not belonging to, that don't belong to OPEC necessarily.
I see.
And don't have that bang effect of if they decline, it has this massive effect on the market. But a massive decline of price has effect on their national politics.
Amos, Jeb Bush is going to unveil his energy policy today. It's likely going to include plans to lift the oil embargo. What's the negative in lifting the oil embargo? I still don't understand.
Well, I think I just believe that we have to look at a broader picture of what this actually does. And I think
but
we've
what's
had
the
very little
negative? What's the
conversation.
negative of lifting the ban?
Well, first, I don't believe it will actually achieve the goals that those who are promoting it will achieve. But I think this is the beginning of a conversation.
So the negative is, I'm sorry.
That I believe that it's not the right time to have that conversation today. And I think that we have to continue that conversation, both in Congress and outside Congress, and understand what's happening in the oil markets generally.
Amos, good to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Amos Hochstein there. Jeb Bush will